The Shock Your Potential podcast, where we focus on creating positive, productive, and profitable workplaces. I am your host, Michael Sherlock. I am a leadership and sales expert, best known for being serious about business, despite what you may think by my appearance of often very colorful hair and sometimes crazy shoes. My guests bring a wealth of information that will support your career and your business, along with many pearls of wisdom to support balance in your personal and professional lives. Listen in as I have another amazing conversation with a guest who will certainly shock your potential. So Cherie Burton is a pioneering spiritual psychologist whose evolutionary stand, speak, shine method transforms women, although I know we have some men on here, so maybe there's some things you can learn from it,
definitely,
into authentically embodied and empowered feminine leaders. And men, you can find your feminine side as well. It's important. She is a mother of 6, an author, an international speaker, and host of the Women Seeking Wholeness podcast, which I can't wait to learn more about. So she's got great degrees in psychology and sociology. So she's got some smarts to back up all this stuff as well. Now, just to throw this in here, she was crowned Mrs. Utah 2004, has become a skilled mentor in speaking, beauty, and queenly secrets, coaching multiple females who won pageant titles. So, Cherie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So, Cherie, I hit some of the highlights of your bio, but tell us a little bit more about you, your business, and how you help people, especially women, to shock their potential.
Wow. And I love Shock Your Potential, by the way. It's just,
thank you.
It's really moving. I would have to say, I interview a lot of people like you, and I have found over the years that everyone who has emerged in some way as an influencer went through a strong descent process.
Mm-hmm.
And in some way, and then we go through them in multiple forms throughout our lives, like a roller coaster. I kind of hit a rock bottom. There's a strong family history of depression and suicide and mental illness, particularly bipolar disorder in my family of origin. My parents have 7 kids, and of the 7, almost all of them have been diagnosed bipolar, except for myself and one other sibling. My dad lost an aunt who was bipolar to suicide. In her suicide letter, she asked my parents to raise her 3-year-old son, so he was adopted into our family when he was 3. And then my own sister took her life, who's 2 years younger than I am, the year that I was Mrs. Utah, actually. So when she left behind 5 children. Wow. She lived in the same community as me, and it was really, really, as you can imagine, super devastating. But it was also kind of that line in the sand. Because when I heard Shock Your Potential, I'm like, that was one defining moment where that shocked my potential. It's like, what would she say if she could speak now? It's been 15 years since she passed. And I certainly have seen the aftermath with her family and whatnot. But it's like the earth groans with untold stories and people who felt disempowered to the extent that they felt silenced, or they felt sick, or they felt marginalized. And I just have always kind of known, even since I was really young, even when I was super introverted as a young kid, that I would be a speaker. I would share things through words that could wake people up, so to speak. And I didn't really have, I can say that now, I'm 51, but I didn't have that verbiage like even 10 years ago to say that that's what I'm doing. But I guess I have the gift of gab a little bit, in the sense that I like to say things that get people to think. And I mean, the superfluous journey of pageantry was just a way for me to claim my beauty and my voice as well. It was like, okay, whatever, I wore the crown and I can cross that off the bucket list. But losing my sister that same year, it was this huge paradox, And so for me, the business part of it has been waffling through all of the loss. I lost my firstborn daughter. Like, there's just been a lot of loss in my life. A lot of disorientation with earth. I think we're all spiritually homesick to some degree. And I can see that in people. When I worked in clinical spaces, I could see it. I could see that we were drugging people up and trying to get them to talk it out. But there was this thing missing. And I wanted to find maybe multiple things, but especially this whole, like, the soul part of it, the soul of healing, not religious and not even necessarily totally spiritual. It's just like, you have this body and you have this spirit, and that soul space wants to be heard. And I really believe people experience soul sickness, and it comes out as a mental illness, whether they've inherited it and it's been passed down generationally. So my business is Stand, Speak, Shine. And it's all about empowering that. And it's for men and women. I've never had a man come through my courses, but I have 3 sons, and 2 of them are in college. One is 8 years old, and I have 3 daughters also. But my sons are I want to say that they're like healthy feminists. They see how the feminine has been silenced for millennia. And I have always asked them questions. How does that feel to you? What do you think about that? Which is a very feminine process. It's all about going within, instead of, this is the way it is. This is what we're taught. Here's the traditions. Here's the rules. Here's the commandments. Here's the whatever. No, like, the feminine is all about nuance and inclusivity, and taking everything that's marginalized and bringing it back to the heart of things. So in that sense, men are very connected to my work as well, to bring out those qualities in them so they can experience full emotional and spiritual healing.
I love it. And it is, I know what you mean, in terms of feeling that disconnect, where is the pain versus where do we find solution? And I think it's interesting that you brought up, we can medicate it, we can do talk therapy. Those things have their place, but none of them totally deal with the whole issue. And I've participated in both. I actually sold it in pharmaceuticals for quite a while. And after my father passed, I could not get out of my depression. And I have a history of suffering from depression as well. And so it was the first and only time that I went on medication for it. And it actually helped bridge for me the time. I think I was on Prozac for maybe 6 months, and it helped for me to find a bridge back over. But I remember the day that I thought, if I keep taking this, I will need to take this forever, because it has been a bridge, but now it can be a crutch. And I don't want that. I want to figure out a different way to manage this. And so, talk therapy and those things help. But when you are experiencing a lot of disconnect from things, there's really not one solution there, which tells you that there's still something missing from everything. I think it's a really insightful way to look at it.
Yeah. All of us are carrying so much unprocessed trauma from the time we were in utero, and maybe even before that, because we do inherit through epigenetics. There's a whole emerging field of study on this, but we don't just inherit our ancestors' eyes, hair color, and skin tone. We inherit some of their unprocessed trauma. It's a whole emerging field of science that is looking into this. So you see souls come through that are a little more distressed. It's like they're here to clear something. And I believe that the people on the earth right now, we are the cleanup crew. We are the ones that will have the awareness and the tools, things like EMDR and somatic body work. And there are so many things that we can do, energy psychology, plant medicine, to get this trauma out, other than just talking about it over, because you can get in a loop, psychic loop, just from talking about it.
Well, you really can, because I was just interviewing somebody earlier, and we were talking about, you can't just say, stop thinking about that, or once it's out, it's done, because the more you talk and the more you recognize, or you're immersed in it, the more it becomes present in your head. I also remember there was a time in my life where I almost embraced, the first time when I had my first real depressive episode, I was a senior in high school, and I actually wanted to end my life. And I remember then for a while, I almost wore that like a badge, like it was like, I wanted to tell people, I've gone through this, I've suffered, I wanted to end my life. And one day again, I'm like, why are you telling this story?
who
Yeah.
cares? Like, not that they don't care, but why
Right.
why do I keep telling this story? Because every time I tell the story, it
Or
puts me
like
back there.
reinforcing. Yeah. Yeah.
And
You're
I
going
want to
back
move
into the
beyond
time.
that.
Right.
Yeah.
I think the key is that so when we go through something, we extrapolate the wisdom from it and the memory of it, but the charge goes away. So if we can tell the story and the charge isn't there and it's helping someone in our vulnerability and like,
Yep.
hey, I've been there. I know exactly how you feel. I wanted to end my life. I have to tell you, Michael, I haven't met anybody yet who's gotten real with me on any level that has not had a time in their life that they wanted to commit suicide.
Yep.
We're just not talking about it.
Right.
Right. But if you've been in that depth, you have a level of experience and wisdom around that enables you, an expert, to come back and share with people. But as long as you're not looping into the emotion of it and the victim mentality, which obviously you're not, but I meet a lot of people who get so engulfed in the story that they relive it and they're stuck. It's like a
Yeah.
hamster wheel, and they get attention from it.
Well, yeah. And I think, through my 20s, I think I probably was characterized like that. I wasn't necessarily seeking attention, but yet I was. And I was still going through it. I was still having, lots of challenges with it. And it wasn't until my 30s where I actually learned how much my diet was affecting my mood. And for instance, if I eat a bowl of cereal or if I eat a donut in the morning, my blood sugar spikes and then plummets, and my mood is you can't pull me out of it that day. So when people bring donuts to the office, I'm like, I want one so badly, but that is not just going to impact the scale. That's going to impact here. I can't do it. And when I found that, I started, having better outcomes in terms of my moods and being more steady. But prior to that, it was keeping those stories going was almost my, like I said, kind of sometimes an armor, but I think sometimes it was my way of saying, I can't get out of this. I didn't know I was saying that to people, but I look back now and go, that was probably even a bigger cry for help. If I'm still telling these stories,
Right.
then I'm still not out of it.
Yeah, exactly. And we tell stories about so many things, right? And so there's a phrase, perception guides biology. Bruce Lipton said that. So it's how we're looking at those stories. It's the lens that we're looking through that creates the emotional charge that affects our health. It affects our posterity. It affects everything. And so for me, I'm like, okay, it's that inquiry process. Like, is this really true? I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Byron Katie, but she has this whole thing on loving what is, and then going within and always asking, is this true? Is this true? Is this true? And when you get to the heart of it, usually it's illusion. And we have all this emotional charge around illusion, around things we can't control.
Oh gosh, yes.
So for me, depression lives over here in the past. We can't, it's woulda, shoulda, coulda, regret, shame, loss, grief, all of that stuff. We cannot get it back. And then anxiety is over here in the future. What might happen? The fear of what if? Neither one of these states allow us to be in the present, which is where our power actually is. So excessive worry, excessive regret, remorse, what have you, self beat up, self shame, all lives over here. This is, I'm not going to be good enough to handle this, whatever. So if we access now, if we access the power of now, to quote Eckhart Tolle, that's being present is actually where all of our strength and empowerment lives. Present.
And you're right. We don't stop to recognize that or repeat that enough or believe it enough.
Right.
And it's, I think getting people to the mindset of just saying, okay, I can handle whatever happens. I can remain flexible and agile. And, so I've been enjoying having this dialogue because it really is putting us in a different space. And as we're talking, I'm thinking this is so perfect for what you're saying, to just live in the now and find the power of the now.
Yeah.
And maybe embracing that will help reduce the fear of the future.
Yeah. We literally have the power to create any reality we choose. And I know we hear that
Mhm.
a lot, but it's actually true. You
Mhm.
know, all of our stories live over here in the past. But when you wake up to the fact that you don't have to worry about the future because you get to choose how you feel, what perception you're going to have about whatever happens. I mean, we could have an economic collapse. We could have rioting in the street. We could, who
Mhm.
knows? And for me, it's like, I trust that the lens I look through is love.
Mm.
So one of the mantras that came to me after a really powerful retreat I went to recently was, there's nothing. I was thinking about all the things in me I want to change, right? I was just doing
Mhm.
this little assessment, which can be empowering and very disempowering at the same time. So I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, if I'm going to do that, I need to write over here things that are going right, things that are working. But when
Right.
I was narrowing in on those things that I needed to shift, I literally heard, there's nothing to heal. And I was like, yes, there is. There's this. I suck at this. I'm impatient. I'm all these things. And it's like, you're whole at the
Mm.
core of who you are. And so if you love what is, it was like, I'm paraphrasing the download I got because it didn't come through words, but it was exactly what I was telling you. Like, if I were to embrace the beauty of the now, there wouldn't be anything to fix in me.
Mm.
It would just be, this is what is, this is what's happening. I cannot control it. The only thing that I can control is how I love.
Mm.
And I used to have like my kids laugh at me. Um, I have this whole hobby of reading near-death experience books. Like if a new one comes out, I have to get it and read it because I just think it's so fascinating. They all come back from the other side and say the
Yeah.
exact same thing. It's
Yes.
all about love. That's it.
Yes.
The whole point of this whole thing.
Yeah. Have you as you were talking earlier, I was thinking about this book. So now I know you've probably read it. It was probably from you and I are the same age. So it
Uh-huh.
was maybe the late 70s, 80s. My mom got it. And of course, I've read everything. And it was Judith something and it was called Embraced by the Light.
Betty Eady. Yes.
Yes.
Embraced by the
And
light.
yes. And her whole thing was she had that near death experience. And, you were talking about, we're the cleanup crew on earth. And her whole thing was what she saw is that as souls, before we come down to earth, we choose the experiences we want to go through. So, and then we choose the other souls that we want to help teach us that lesson. And
Yes.
she was like, so if you have had a horribly traumatic experience, your soul said, I need to understand empathy of other people or something. So I'm going to have a traumatic experience in my earthly form, and I'm going to choose a couple other people to be a part of that. And I remember I've probably, over the years, I probably have read that 3 or 4 times. Probably the last time I read it was maybe when I was 20 or something, probably in my mid-20s when I was going through my divorce. And I thought, did I really pick my ex-husband to put me through this? Because if I
Yeah.
did, that was stupid.
Well, even the victim perpetrator relationship, right?
Yeah.
Like that's why no one's ever a victim. I know that sounds, there's sex trafficking, there's so many horrible children are abused, but a soul, and from what I've read, a soul does not incarnate without a knowledge that they will be passing through things that grow them and expand them as a soul, including pain and suffering.
Mm-hmm.
So no one's ever a victim in that regard. They can always rise to the level of love and forgiveness and perspective.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean we don't have vast compassion for people who got hurt.
Absolutely.
I had a really horrible relationship in my mid 20s that was really devastating, and I almost married him, and it was kind of reminding me of what you said about your ex-husband. It's like he was, for so many years I was so angry at him because I had felt abandoned and all these, there were a lot of dynamics happening. And interestingly enough, it finally clicked for me that he was just super wounded himself.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually had this dream. I don't know why I'm going to share it. Maybe somebody needs to hear it, but I've had a handful of dreams in my life that have been highly symbolic and they taught me things. But in this dream, I was sitting on a beach and I was on a park bench and I was looking at the ocean and I was all by myself and I was totally vibing. I'm like, oh, and all of a sudden I look and I could see somebody walk towards me. And then I realized it was Dave, my ex-boyfriend. And I was all this anxiety. I'm like mad and like, ugh. And then I'm like, what am I going to say to him? And as he got closer to me, he started to regress in age. And by the
Oh,
time he was at my feet, he was a toddler and he was like this for me to pick him up. And it was
wow.
like, this is all. And I heard like, this is all he ever wanted. And I picked him up and hugged him. And then I woke up and it was like, okay, and I know some of his history. He was abused as a child by his mother. And so it just clicked for me. I'm like, of course I would be the one that he played out his abandonment
Right.
and things on, right? Because that happened to him. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. That's just my take on coming from the space of love in business, in self-care, in
Mm-hmm.
all of our relationships. It starts with, how do I bring love in and love myself? And how do I breathe it out to everything else, including my experiences? What is in
Yeah.
front of me, good, bad, or ugly?
Well, I think you're right on. And I always say that you never know what goes on behind anybody else's four walls. So, it's really easy it's really easy to judge ourselves, but it's really easy to make assumptions about other people, especially if they make us mad or they hurt us. And, sometimes it's very hard to get out of that pain and suffering. It took me a long time to get out of that pain and suffering with my ex-husband, and probably you with Dave as well. At some point you reach it and you go, okay, no, the story is like, I'm not mad anymore at my ex-husband. What doesn't suit me, it doesn't serve me to do that. And
Yeah.
there's no benefit for me to hold on to that. Um, I I had to go through it, I think, because you have to decide when you're going to give up pain. And our bodies are telling a story, and they tell the story of whatever's going on in our head most of the time as well.
Right. Yes. And there's another saying, the body sheds the tears the eyes refuse to shed.
Ooh.
And the story is written on you somewhere. So by the time it shows up as a physical issue, it's had an emotional, energetic root for some time.
Ah.
It's embedded in there somewhere. And that's why I say with trauma, when we get to a space in medicine where we're really going core and deep with unprocessed trauma, which is energy. It's not, you can't draw someone's blood and see the trauma and the blood on the slide, right? You can't
Mm-hmm.
take an MRI and see trauma, but you
Right.
can see when it goes physical, when it solidifies or condenses or materializes into something.
Yeah.
And sometimes again, that's generational, but when medicine finally gets to the point where it's ready to go deep, and it isn't about pharmaceuticals and it isn't about feeding these special interest groups, but it's truly about healing, and it isn't about
Mm-hmm.
money, that's when we'll start to see the shift in healthcare. And I believe we have all of those tools right now on the earth. It's just a matter of getting them in the right hands.
And yeah, I agree. I agree. And being open enough to look at things from a different perspective.
Yes.
Yeah, without a doubt. It's amazing. So, when you work with your clients, tell me a little bit just about, how do you get them to start their journey of, kind of this, different kind of level of awareness? How do you help them start to pull back some of the layers?
Sure. That's a really good question. So coming back to the feminine and the masculine, which are two energies that live in us, yin yang, whatever you want to call it, we all have different ways of moving through the world with those energies. It doesn't matter. It's not gender specific. So like if I'm leading with my masculine, I'm getting things done. I'm narrowing in, I'm focusing, I'm taking action, all of those things. I think those systems and structures that we put in place when we're in that is important. But what sometimes it's called scaffolding, right? But we need to climb into that scaffolding. And that's where the feminine is. It's intuition and movement and breath.
Mm.
So when I work with people, that's where we start. I have a Stand, Speak, Shine school where we do this as a group. But if I'm working in a personal coaching relationship with somebody, I always start with, are you in your body? Have you
Mm.
checked out? Because you cannot come into your power if you're not grounded. And that's where the Stand and Stand, Speak, Shine came. Because why would you use your voice if you're not grounded? Why would
Mhm.
you do, even your relationships or running a business? If you're not in your body, you're not making the most intuitive wisdom, kind of you're not leading with wisdom. You're off the cuff. So that comes with breath. I did a 200-hour yoga teacher training with my daughter when she was 19. She's almost 22 now. And it rocked our worlds. We were like, oh my gosh, why aren't we learning this in school? The power of breath. Like, we need to be learning this stuff literally when we're in preschool, right?
Yes.
And we've just all disassociated and checked out and given our power away because we haven't known how to access our own wisdom. Children do it intuitively. They know what they want. They know how to love. They know how to be in their bodies. So breath is huge, and movement, getting out in nature is massive. If you want to connect to your feminine energy, whether you're male or female, get yourself outside, get in the sun, or even like today is a really cloudy day, but get your feet in the soil, step out in the wind, whatever you need to do, because that's a huge part of accessing that. And then inquiry, just journal writing, contemplation. Music is huge. Anything that you can do to engage your senses. So if I'm working with someone one-to-one, I ask her, what are you doing to be a sensual person? Not a sexy person, that might come later, but senses like,
that might be a byproduct of this.
Yeah, it's a nice osmosis that happens. But what are you looking at? What are you listening to? What are you feeling? What are you smelling? I love essential oils. I'm a huge essential oils freak. But just anything that you can do to open those sensory portals, you're going to feel better. You're going to be more awake. You're going to be in your body. So those are the things: breath, nature, senses, movement.
I love it. And I think that goes just right in line again with, with our theme is, making sure that you're stopping to ground yourself and check in on yourself and take those little, those touch points. I know we're going to have all your information and your confirmation on our show notes. Clearly I've been taping a few episodes today. And, but in case somebody wants to look you up right now because they think that you may be exactly what they're looking for, what's the best way for them to find you?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Michael. So they can just go to standspeakshine.com or cherieburton.com. Takes them both places. I just have some fun freebies on there, a free healing kit that you can download, just a fun lookbook to kind of nourish your senses and get you in your body. I have lots of course offerings and fun things. So at all levels of interest and pay and cost and what have you. But my baby is the Stand Speak Shine school that I do every year. So if somebody feels the call to join in and participate, it's 12 weeks every January to April, and you can pretty much hop on anytime. It doesn't have to be January to April.
That's fantastic. So before we go, I mean, we've given a lot of great concepts here, but do you have any last words of wisdom or pearls of advice for my listeners and viewers?
Healing does not have to be complicated. And I think it goes back to what we said before about being present. When you feel present with yourself, you feel whole and you don't have the compulsion to fix anything. So I would just invite all your listeners to see themselves as whole and see what miracles come forward when they start to look through life through that lens and that perspective. Watch how their perception will guide a new biology through that paradigm shift. That you're already whole.
I love it. Thank you so much, Sheree. It's been an absolute pleasure having you as a guest. And I know my listeners and viewers have taken a lot away from today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of the Shock Your Potential podcast. And as always, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and like us today.